I think that the world has changed undeniably over the past probably 40 years. And I think that women have made a lot of strides and femininity in general has made a lot of strides. Obviously, I think that there's a lot less stigma around women making a lot of money or women going into the workplace or women taking things upon themselves, which is all great. I think that additionally, masculinity has changed in the sense that we are responsible for a lot of things that we maybe weren't responsible before. Obviously, there was the whole Me Too movement, and there was a lot of things that were very good. But what that means is that I think masculinity hasn't had the sort of rebirth in 2023 that makes sense. It doesn't have an identity that's well defined. And so what that means is there's a lot of young men growing up today who that's the time, right? When you're supposed to become a man, when you're going from whatever age it is, but when you're supposed to become a man, all of a sudden now it's this nebulous thing, whereas it used to be somewhat better defined. And so I think that a lot of people are looking for that kind of, you should do this and be this and act like this.
Baxate, welcome to the Creators Canvas. Thank you so much for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
So where I wanted to start this conversation is, kind of doing some research into, your journey as a content creator. You kind of started in March of 2020. And, there it was just kind of, content that I think you were making for fun, and I think it was chugging water bottles. I think 2 seconds a water bottle, which is pretty insane. So where was kind of your headspace at when you first started creating content? And then what made you eventually shift to the type of content that you're creating now, when it comes to, career advice, software engineering content, life advice, masculinity, gym content? It's quite a big range.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I've actually had a couple iterations on the internet, whether I think a lot of people tried, their hands at a YouTube channel when they were young. It started with a Minecraft YouTube channel with my brother. Didn't have a lot of success there. I think we were too young, and I've had and then I did a little bit of streaming in high school. So I've had my hand at the internet a couple times here. And then, yeah, during COVID, I posted stupid TikToks, right, for fun. I think everyone was cooped up. That's when TikTok really exploded. So I would just post dumb things, kind of like, yeah, party tricks that I had accumulated over the years. And then I took an extended hiatus. I was focusing on school and other things. But throughout that time in school, as I got older, I was in a fraternity and I became sort of a de facto guy to go for advice relating to career. I would look over people's resumes. I would give them advice on their situation. And after college, I sort of just had the idea, well, I think I can sort of extend my reach and help more people if I were to have this hand again at this whole TikTok thing or at this whole content creation thing. I think that a lot of people could benefit maybe from some of the stuff I have to share. And so that's sort of the catalyst for me posting the new age of content, which I do. And really, you said I have a wide range, which I do. It's just, I think that people have a unique set of experiences that brought them to where they are today. And I think that that's where I bring my advice, is just from my experiences. I think that, things that worked for me might work for other people. And so if I don't know something, I'm very open about that. And I will say, listen, I don't have experience in this. I can't help you. But the things that I do, I'm more than happy to share my opinions and experiences on. And if some people resonate with that, then they do.
Beautifully said. And I would definitely say, you're providing a lot of value to your audience. And I think about the Google Sheet template for the expense tracker. That was quite the hit, with a lot of people in your community, which is really cool to see. One of the things you mentioned, Baxate, is, someone's unique experiences, create them into the person that they are today. And then, for you, you've mentioned a lot of the challenges that you've faced in your own life. And then you've built a resilience to, overcome those things and look at them in the sense of, hey, like, I don't deserve anything. Everything needs to be earned. What are some life experiences that stick out to you that helped you develop that attitude?
Yeah. So firstly, I want to acknowledge that I'm immensely privileged. I think compared to a lot of people, my trials and tribulations are very small. That being said, there are a couple of moments. I think that some of the big sort of catalysts are, one is that I have a twin brother, actually, which I don't share very often, but I have a twin. So, and he's, a brother. And so I think that growing up with someone who you're constantly comparing yourself with is definitely will change the dynamic of how you compare yourself to other people, but also how you view yourself when you have basically a spitting image of yourself to benchmark against. And that created a lot of areas for humility when you just are worse at certain things and there's almost nothing you
Mm,
can do about it. And so, additionally, I think that we did eventually get pretty good at not comparing ourselves and realizing that we are two independent human beings with independent life paths. And that was also very beneficial because it helped me realize that, everyone's different, and comparing, hyper focusing on one aspect of your life to compare yourself against someone else is not really healthy because you're not bringing in all the other things that makes you guys different or two people different. So I would say having a twin definitely was a big catalyst. There were
mm,
some more traumatic type areas that I haven't brought up before relating to, my twin brother and him actually having some serious health complications. And we've gotten through that, but also realizing that, you know, I've had almost the best scenario to where I've had to confront mortality of someone who I care very much about without it actually coming to the fact of losing someone. And
yeah.
so I got to learn a lot of the lessons without having to feel a lot of the pain, which was also, and that's about all the detail I feel comfortable sharing. But that was another
Yeah.
thing to where a lot of my experiences and a lot of my perspectives come from that, and realizing that you can't take anybody for granted, and you can't take anybody's life for granted or your own life for granted. The last one being, this one's a really small one, but I grew up very skinny, just someone who was not outwardly confident really by any means.
Mm,
And getting into the gym and sort of cultivating confidence through my body, and having people treat me differently was another area to where I think that I've grown. I sort of have a perspective on the ability to change oneself for the better through consistency, determination, but also that you can change. That if you don't like something about yourself, there are ways, and it might take time, but there are ways to change it. So, yeah,
Yeah, beautifully said. And there are so many things that I want to touch on there.
sure,
Going off the last part really quickly, when it comes to, being in the gym, I resonate a lot with the gym content that you've created, especially when it comes to you talking about the impact that the gym has had on you. And it's deeper than just having a physical transformation. It's the mental transformation that comes along with that, that I think has been so powerful for so many people, especially in the self-development space, and I think that is something that I'm always grateful for. One of the things you mentioned was, getting a look at mortality kind of face to face, when it comes to someone that, you love in your life. How did that shift your behavior of how you were before that and after that? And the reason I ask is because I think about a time in my own life, probably about 2.5 years ago, when I had a similar situation with a loved one. And ever since then, like, I have approached life completely differently and my behavior has significantly changed. I think we can experience something, but if our actions don't change from that experience, then, did we really learn? So how did your actions change and how you kind of present yourself to the world?
yeah. I think that it's sort of twofold. The one is how I sort of treat myself. The second one is how I treat others.
Mm,
And how I treat myself is just realizing again, I think that when people have to confront mortality for the first time, it is a profound experience, because especially when you're in your a young teenage male, you feel invincible, and
yes.
for in a lot of ways you kind of are invincible, but that's not true for everybody. And so having to confront that, even someone who was in the same invincible stage as I was, seeing them at their weakest and seeing them, again, very close to sort of having it all be over, it made me be able to be like, okay, no, this whole life thing is not a given. And so I have taken a perspective of, okay, now there's a lot of things I want to do before I go,
Hmm.
and I need to basically ruthlessly try and achieve those things. And they may not be even concrete. It might not be a number, it might not be a title, but there are feelings, and there are emotions, and there are people who I want to share experiences with, that I think like, okay, I have to do these things. Like I have to. I can't sit on my couch and play video games all day,
Mm,
because it could be gone. Yeah. And then the second fold, which I said is how I treat other people,
mm,
is I think a lot of people are really, really good at masking what's going on in their own lives.
agree.
And yeah, and so after going through something like that, and that my whole family, and really it wasn't even how I but seeing how my parents and my dad would go to work and sort of just shut that all down and just completely ignore it and go through as if nothing was happening. And I think a lot of people, again, are really, really good at that. I would actually argue that people are better at it than the people who are worse at it, in the sense that you have no idea. I think most people have no idea what's going on in people's personal lives, what they're going through. And so it allows you to offer the benefit of the doubt to people. I think of an analogy I heard, which was, if you cut somebody off in traffic, you're a lot more quick to give yourself affordances. Oh no, I'm a good driver, but this, that, and the other, right? Give yourself excuses. But
Mhm.
when somebody cuts you off in traffic, it's like, okay, they're a terrible driver. You immediately write them off. And it's like, okay,
Mm.
you need to be able to put yourself in some other else's shoes and be like, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know what's going on. And I generally am a fairly forgiving person. I'm someone who haven't had my trust really betrayed on a level that would make me a cynical or a you know, bitter person. But I'm very, very conscious of that. I don't know what's going on in people's lives, and not to pass judgment very quickly.
Beautifully said. It's this deep ability to put yourself in other people's shoes, which it sounds like, you keep at the forefront of your mind. And even I think about, small and silly examples sometimes backstage, like if a friend doesn't text back for like a week, my mind instantly goes to, okay, they don't care about this relationship anymore. But it's like, okay, wait, let me take a step back for a second and then realize that, hey, this person deserves just as much compassion. And what about the instances where I didn't text someone back for a week? Was that because I didn't care about the relationship, or was that because of something I was going through? And I think kind of that perspective shift is so powerful, and it comes from a really good place. So really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, man.
One of the things that I wanted to touch on is, the different types of content that you make. So, with having a variety of verticals, is there a type of content that you enjoy making the most? And what would that be? Or do you enjoy all of it equally?
No, I definitely enjoy making some stuff more than others. I would say that the sort of life content and the even the masculinity content are some of my favorite to make.
Hmm.
It tends to be the ones that don't maybe have the furthest reach, or also it's oftentimes somewhat controversial, and I fully understand that, and I own up to that. But I think that is some of the most fun for me to make for a number of reasons. I think that particularly when it comes to masculinity, I think that there's a lot of other creators out there and a lot of other influences out there that I disagree with. And I think that, young men today are in a kind of a weird situation. And so trying to be any kind of positive influence out there makes me feel like
Mm-hmm.
I could have an excised impact, an impact that's much larger than, for example, explaining a software engineering concept, which I also love doing. I'm very passionate about my career, about my job, about my field. And I want everyone who could possibly be passionate about it as well to be able to explore that. But I feel sometimes I feel a little pigeonholed into that tech sector. And
Yeah.
so I would say that it's fun to be able to, explore other avenues.
Yeah, and when it comes to the masculinity content that you have made, I mean, you are speaking my language. I think that it's a concept that I have been consuming and studied and learned so much about, especially like the past like 2 to 3 years. And to your point, there are creators right now in the space that it's like, hey, you kind of hear their message and you're like, ooh, like I don't know if that's the best thing for our youth to be hearing. And then you take it upon yourself to try and share a different message. And I would say, although it might not have the widest reach, it could have the deepest for the subset of people that, it does hit. And one of the concepts that you talk about is, masculinity is, currently in a crisis. What do you think that crisis is, and why do you think we're currently in that place?
Sure. So I think that the world has changed undeniably over the past probably 40 years. And I think that women have made a lot of strides, and femininity in general has made a lot of strides. Obviously, I think that there's a lot less stigma around women making a lot of money, or women going into the workplace, or
Mhm.
women taking things upon themselves, which is all great. I think that additionally, masculinity has changed in the sense that we are responsible for a lot of things that we maybe weren't responsible before. Obviously, there was the whole Me Too movement, and there was a lot of things that were very good. But what that means is that I think masculinity hasn't had the sort of full rebirth in 2023 that makes sense. It doesn't have a
Mm,
an identity that's well defined. And so what that means is there's a lot of young men growing up today who are, that's the time, right? When you're supposed to become a man, when you're going from whatever age it is, but when you're supposed to become a man, all of a sudden now it's this nebulous thing, whereas it used to be somewhat better defined. And so I think that a lot of people are looking for that kind of, you should do this and be this and act like this, and it's not really out there. And a couple people who, again, I just don't agree with, came through really sort of loud and, again, like confidently said, no, this is what a man is, or this is what a woman is. And it's very easy to gravitate towards that. And that's why I don't fault any of these impressionable young men for looking for idols, because there is somewhat of a void. And so I think that's where it is there was this gap. And it's easy to sort of, when you hear someone confidently saying something and they have what you would consider to be credibility, whether that's money or women or fame, to be like, no, what he's saying makes sense. And I think that it's not what I would agree with. And so I think that's what it is. I think it's this, it needs to be redefined, right? I think that that's what the crisis is the world change. It's time to redefine it. And we need to redefine it in a way that makes sense given the current state of the world, and not trying to hark back to a time before things, changed. I think that we've made a lot of strides. I think the world is generally a better place than it was before. So let's not go back to that. Let's change it and make it what it makes sense to today.
yeah, I completely agree. And going back to the point of not faulting young people for, grabbing on to the first thing that they find resonates with them. I remember reading this US Surgeon General announcement. I think it was released recently. There's currently an epidemic of loneliness in the US, and young people are getting particularly hit the hardest. I think it's something like the age group of like 13 to 24 or something of the sort, spend, 70% less time with their friends than they did like 2 decades ago.
Wow.
And then, yeah, it's insane. And thinking about, being in the pit of loneliness, for, a boy, a teenager, or a man, and, not having kind of that purpose that, you and I know is, what can kind of set men free. And then you then look towards these male role models, and it's like, okay, so this is what it is. And that's kind of, where the toxic lessons I think can come from. Does this quote resonate with you? It goes something along the lines of, hard times create good men, and then good men create easy times, and easy times create weak men. And it's just like a circular cycle.
Yeah, I think that it does resonate with me. I think that, history would indicate that that's also, the case, right? But I
Mhm.
think that the reasoning why that might happen is also a fault of just the sort of last step in that iteration of easy times create weak men could be stopped if, and that's something that I, think about all the time, is like, okay, I plan on being very successful. How would I sort of instill some of the characteristics of hardworking and humility and all these things into my kids? And it's something that I do struggle with. But I think if that sort of problem could be solved, I don't know if that necessarily has to happen. I don't know if the cycle necessarily has to happen. I think that that kids of the grandkids of very wealthy people generally are very spoiled and maybe aren't strong men or good men, whatever the quote is. I don't have the answer of how to solve that. Does it resonate with me? I would say yes. I don't think it's a fact of life like gravity that it's sort of doomed to happen, and
Mm.
we're just in this cycle and it'll repeat, and hard times are coming, and after that, there'll be another generation of great men.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. For another episode that we did, we interviewed a like popular, like business and life coach on social media. And one of the things he talked about was, his experience as a kid. He grew up in a group home, and, it was just like the most extreme level of poverty that, a person could imagine in the US. And, the conversation that we had was, how can I instill in my kids who now grow up with a silver spoon of like the same lessons that I learned from overcoming that hardship? And he says, that's something that him and his wife talk about a lot. And so to your point, it's a hard problem to solve, but just because something is hard, we need to try anyways. And, why not? So, one thing I wanted to talk about backside is you had this video of, 5 life lessons. I believe they were nobody has it figured out. As you grow up, you're also watching your parents grow up. Life will always be unfair. The best way to approach relationships is how can I add value to this relationship? And there are no bunk beds in a coffin. So, I imagine each of those lessons perhaps has an experience or story of how you came to that. So I was wondering if you could pick out maybe, a lesson or two and then share, kind of your story or experience of how you came to that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I think that one that I just wish a lot of people really did focus more on was the parents one. I think that whether you have a good relationship with your parents or a bad relationship with your parents, through listening of all of my friends growing up in different situations than I did, but also looking at my own situations, I think it's very easy to blame a lot of your own faults or to you know complain about the situation you grew up in or the way that your parents handled certain things. And as I get older, I am older now than the age my mom was when she was married. And I think that's true for a lot of people.
Mm,
That's kind of like, whoa, okay, think about my mental state now. Do I feel like an adult? Would I be ready to raise a kid? I mean, it's kind of wild to think about. And
mm,
so I think having that perspective is, that's mainly the one, but then also the thing I think I mentioned when I'm talking about that is looking at photos, right? And I say that you're watching your parents grow up. And so it's the photos of me when I'm a kid and, looking at my parents and realizing they are they've aged. And it's like in your mind, they're kind of the same people they were when you grew up, but no, they're totally different. They've had just as much life experience as you have since those photos. And having that perspective, I think, will allow you to treat your parents as more human. And that also goes into the second one, which I would guess I can talk about, which is that nobody has it figured out. I think that for a lot of people, their parents, their teachers, whomever it is, have all the answers, right? What they say
mm,
is law. And I have had a couple times where I've had serious sort of disagreements with my father about decisions I've made. And it started off and it was like, okay, like again, what he says is law. I'm under his roof, all so on and so forth. And as I got older, I realized that these decisions not only got bigger, but that I was more steadfast in my reasoning. And
mm,
we just fundamentally had disagreements about certain things in life. And it culminated finally when I actually decided to not pursue a graduate degree and instead to start work immediately. And what that meant is that was sort of like the severing of the ties of I'm no longer under his like on his payroll, right?
yeah.
I can fund myself, I can pay my own bills. And he said the quote that I remember that was really good is, "Listen, I may not always agree with what you do, but I will always support you." And I was like,
Mm,
"Okay, that now all of a sudden we're two people who are he's still my dad and he's still someone I look up to, and there is still that dynamic, but we're two adults who are making decisions and have different perspectives on certain things." And so I think that a lot of people, the earlier they realize that when I say nobody has it figured out, really like nobody has the right answer to everything. Nobody has the right answer to situations you're in. Realizing that, okay, there are things that at some point you need to be able to make a decision on your own, or you need to be able to look critically at decisions that they make,
mm.
is a super valuable lesson. And that's one that I think that those two are obviously particularly relating to parents but I think that parents have a profound way of who you become as a person. So I think those are two really important lessons.
Yeah, beautifully said. And touching upon the point of, the conversation that you had with your dad, and he told you, hey, like, I may not agree with all the decisions that you make, but I'll always support you. Something that I feel like is a beautiful realization that we can have as kids is, they're always coming from a place of love. And, whether it's, disciplining you in a hard way or letting you not do something that you really want to do. It's like they all have our best intentions at heart, and even though we can vehemently disagree with them about something, I know that has been something that has really helped me, kind of come from a place of compassion with my parents. So You mentioned the disagreement that you had with your dad, and that's actually a conversation that you mentioned in one of your YouTube videos. And in that YouTube video, you mentioned the time capsule. So in sixth grade, you wrote down three life paths that you wanted to pursue: computer engineer, going to MIT, and crush on so and so. And so for you, Baxate, how did you know at such a young age that you wanted to be in the field professionally that you're in? Because I feel like for so many people, they don't have that clarity so early. And it sounds like for you, you always did.
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, I can't ignore it, right? So my dad is a foreign dad. He's from Lebanon, and so I'm half
Mm,
Lebanese. The flag is to the right of me there, but I think that the engineer, doctor, lawyer trope exists for a lot of immigrant parents, and
100%.
so, yeah, and so part of it comes from that, right? My dad studied electrical engineering, which is still within the same school of electrical and computer engineering. But that being said, at that time I did, really, really look up to my dad, and I still do, but I liked his field. When I went and visited him at work, I really liked what he was doing. And I was sort of fascinated by all things technology. It's just something I was drawn to. The other thing is that I've always had a natural aptitude for math and science, even as early as sixth grade. I mean, it was just something that came naturally to me. And I think that a lot of people's passions are determined by things that they have a natural talent for. If you're good at something, you're going to like it more. It's just the way that it works.
Mm,
And so that being said, it just sort of never really changed. I mean, I was really good at math and science. I continued, and I just pursued that pretty, directly. And then my passion for technology never faded. And I'm not saying that that can't happen for other people. I think that, and the other thing I hear a lot is like, when I was in sixth grade, I wanted to be a firefighter, or I wanted to be, an NFL player. And it's absolutely true. Like I think that it just so happened that it aligned with things that never really changed for me. It's not like I had this vision of my life that turned out to be exactly what it was. It was just more, as I grew older, the things that needed to stay the same stayed the same, so that I was able to pursue that.
interesting. So at the top layer, it's this, innate interest in the things that, always came naturally to you and, interest that you always had. So, whether it was, being good at math and science paired with, that interest in technology. So have you ever peeled back that layer and seen, kind of, at a deeper sense why you found yourself to be interested in those things? And a good example I can give you is kind of thinking about my own life. One thing that I have always had an innate talent in, like ever since I was a teenager, is I've always been an incredible listener. And over the past few years, like I really started to reflect on like where does that come from me? Like why does that come so naturally? And I realized that it's because I'm a good listener because I'm always captivated by whoever I'm talking to, regardless of, their status or who they are, coming from this sense of, hey, like I really do believe that regardless who I have on the other side of me, there's always so much I can learn. And, that's where the ability to be a good listener has always come from for me. And so for you, have you ever peeled back that a little bit?
Yes, I don't know if I've gone to the level. Maybe it sounds like you have. I would say that I'm a fairly even keeled person. My
Hmm.
emotions do not really fluctuate that much positively or negatively.
Mm,
And also, I think that I'm a very logical person. I try
mm,
to explain everything, and this is to a fault, even. I try to explain everything of why even I might be feeling a certain way, and try and almost break.
mm,
And this is something I've even done when I was very young, of trying to explain people acting the way that they do,
mhm,
not based on, necessarily emotions or just impulses, but more based on, well, this happened, so that happened, so this happened, and that's why this happened. And I think that that
mm,
sort of played into, and that's also another reason why I was never interested in poetry. I was never interested in the liberal arts types of fields, is because
mhm,
I'm like, it's too much based, like there's no right answer, and then not having the right answer always really frustrated me. And so
mm,
I think that that's why I need that sort of clarity in my own life. That's something that's one more layer deep that I haven't really gone,
Mm,
but it's something that's always been true for me. And I think that's part of the reason why math and science are always, I'm like, no, it makes sense, right? I think that if it doesn't make sense to me in the moment, right, it's not like I learn every concept and it just naturally goes into my brain. But I'm like, if I focus hard enough and if I pay attention enough and if I try hard enough, it will start to make sense and it will make sense. And so, and that
mm.
was always a very comforting feeling to me. And I would say that that's why math and science, in conjunction with sort of just my personality, I think that's why I was drawn to those specifically.
Oh, that's so interesting. So, you know, having the right answer and, being very logic based is something that, gives you a sense of security. And so now, being in the content creation world, you're having to flex a little bit more of those traditional creative muscles where, hey, there isn't the right answer. Like, how do I edit this video? Okay, it turns out I can edit it 100 different ways. And, which way will resonate? I mean, we'll have to see. So, how has that journey been for you? Because I imagine it's something that is completely opposite of what you're used to.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that it's a lot of trial and error. I try and figure out, I mean, I've tried and figure out why certain videos do better than others. I come up with
Mm,
theories and then they're disproven. I try and, I do different things, I'll record it in different ways, edit it in different ways, use different vocal tonalities. I mean, this is all stuff that I actually do focus on as if it were, variables. And to a sense they are, but also I think that it can be kind of a crapshoot in the sense that like certain videos will blow up and you don't really know why, or certain videos
yeah.
will actually be really well received and you feel like you didn't try that hard on them. And that's honestly been the biggest thing for me is the ones that I, really put a lot of effort into maybe aren't as the ones that are as well received as ones that I was almost like a passing thought in the shower. Yeah, it's something that I'm navigating. It's something that I'm trying to deal with, but it's definitely a new environment for me. Like you said, that creative aspect. I think that I do still put a very logical spin on it. Like I said, of like variables, trial and error until you get something that works. And that's how I've landed, honestly, on like my very simple editing style. It's easy for me. It's consistent, and I know that it works.
So, with that being said, Baxate, has the creative process been something that you've kind of cultivated an interest in? And with it being so unfamiliar, and kind of what I think about for myself is there are areas in life that we've never explored that we're like, hey, that actually I dipped my toe in that, and I actually kind of really enjoy that. So, like a great example is I recently took improv for self development, and after finishing, I was like, scene work is actually really fun. Like building out a scene, like with people or a partner is like something that I would love to like just integrate more into my life just to have something away from, kind of my day job in finance and like the content that I create. And so for you, how was dipping your toe in that? Is that something you have genuine interest in?
Yeah, definitely. I think that I've been exploring it more now, and I think that I think that what's true for probably a lot of content creators, because you do have
Mhm.
to be a little bit, I think, crazy to even jump in this space, is the sort of addictive personality or the personality where it's just you'll do everything like almost 100%, at least the ones who make it. And I definitely fall into that category. And so when I started, even before I started seeing some success, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna go full into this, research everything that I can, and start exploring. Like I said, yeah, exploring different avenues. And I think that if you're gonna spend that much time on something, you better at least somewhat enjoy it. Otherwise, I think you'll burn out way too quickly. And so, and that's something I've done in other aspects. But I think that it definitely is something that I'm trying to work on now. Yeah, and like I definitely have a passion for trying I'm looking right now into starting different things in the creator space and I'm getting to flex that creativity a lot and I'm working on a couple of projects right now that I'm super excited about. So that's definitely something that I'm passionate about and exploring currently.
Are those projects anything you can talk about now?
Sure. Yeah. So I obviously I have the YouTube channel that I want to continue posting. So I'm working on some different formats of YouTube videos. And then in
Mm,
addition to that, I'm actually working on starting a podcast of my own.
mm,
What sort of flavor it'll take, I don't know yet. I think that sort of avenue that I want to go down is still within the tech, self-improvement type space. But there's a couple fun, unique sort of, if you want to call them bits or segments, that's where I'm really applying the creative aspect to that I want to do. And so whether it's having people on with their current situation, like on air live, and
Mm.
trying to work through their situation and giving advice, stuff like that.
That's awesome. And, I'm still kind of new to the podcast game, but definitely a resource if you ever had any questions or concerns. Our official launch is next week and something I'm like super, super excited about. And I can't wait to kind of, stay, with the ear to my ground about, projects that you just mentioned and see how that develops for you.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course. So in SF, Baxate, how is the creator community? And is that something you have plugged yourself into? Are there a lot of content creators in tech in SF? I know there are a lot of tech content creators, broadly. I'm curious, how's the SF community?
That's something that I actually need to spend some time doing. I've done no collabs really, and I haven't even I have no idea the resources to try and reach out to these people. I'm sure there
Mm,
are. I know of a couple individually. I'm also someone who's fairly careful about giving like personal information or sharing things. Like I maybe have this irrational fear of just meeting up with people in person that I've never
mm.
met prior. But that being said, yes, I'm sure there's a community. I would be lying if I said I knew where it was or how to find them.
Okay.
I know that obviously the further south you go in California, I think they become more and more prominent. But
Yeah.
definitely tech is a bit more unique of a space.
Yeah, and it's incredible how broad the umbrella of content creation is today, Backstage. Like, if I think about like the wide spectrum of guests that we have on or coming on in the pipeline, like researcher from MIT, who creates content, all the way to stand up comedian, and it's crazy, where the content creation world is going today. And so for you, what aspirations do you have, with what you're doing in content creation, and where do you see yourself wanting to go?
Yeah, I think that just expanding my reach and expanding the number of people I can talk to would be great. I don't have a number in mind. I don't have basically also to not be again, I feel a little pigeonholed right now on
Yeah.
software engineering specifically. I'd like to break out of that a little bit if I can, to be able to explore the other things that I like, whether it's gym content or masculinity content, all that stuff I post already. But again, I'd like to be able to expand those and just also share a little bit more about me specifically. I think that almost all of my videos are very easily digestible in like a this might help me type way, but that's not very good for connecting with me as a person. And I think that that's a huge way to cultivate an audience that also, cares about you, you care about them, is sharing some of those more personal details and is sharing more of your personality. Some of my personality comes out, some of it doesn't. So I would love to be able to share more of that. So really just doing more of what I'm doing and doing it on a broader scale, I would say is what I'm looking for.
One theme from our conversation so far is, this desire you have to, reach people with a message that, you feel really passionately about and resonates a lot with you. So, where does that desire to give that value to people come from for you?
Two things. So the first one is I had a video where I said answers to some of life's questions or life's toughest questions.
Mm,
And one of them was, what is your goal in life? And I said, to make the lives of the people around me as good as I possibly can, to give them the best life I possibly can. And
mm,
so I sort of take that as sort of an attitude towards this whole thing as well, to where I think people talk about it all the time in the content creator state of providing value. And that I take that very literally. And every video I post, I want to have it be able to benefit someone. It's not self-serving. It's not self-indulgent. Hopefully it doesn't come across that way, but I want everybody to be able to take away something from that. And so that's sort of the sharing the message. And the other thing is just my own
mm,
personal experience of, I was 14, I was 15, 16, 17, and everything below, obviously, the age that I am. And I think that everybody, learns throughout life. And I think that being able to just be the person that I wish I had to listen to or to learn
mm.
from when I was younger would have been an invaluable resource. And so I'm like, okay, if I can do that, that'd be great. And I wish other people would do that too. I think that there's some of my favorite content creators are people who basically do that, right? Who are just sharing their experiences or bringing on people to share their experiences, like kind of what you're doing now, to just be like, hey, this is my life. You might gain value out of it.
Yeah, and this concept of, being that person that, you could have grabbed value from, when you were like like younger is like so powerful. I think it's like one of the most incredible ways to give back. And I don't know if you're a fan of Jordan Peterson, but he had this like beautiful conversation where he talked about how to serve is like one of the most like beautiful concepts in life. And I really do believe that. There's something so crazy about how being in service to others, you end up getting more from it than that person gets. And it's kind of like, paradoxical in the way, because it's like you're giving something away. So how can you get more? And it's quite crazy.
Yeah, I think that a very specific example of that, which is my favorite study tip,
Mm,
is explain a concept that you don't fully understand, but you think you understand to somebody else who doesn't get it at all. And if you can
mm,
do that, and if you can work through that, I promise you, you'll understand the concept way, way, way better. So that was my
mm.
biggest way, honestly, to as soon as I would try and find anybody who was struggling and didn't understand it and just explain it to them. And if I could do that, then I'd be like, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah, that's a beautiful advice. So on the topic of, the people that your messages have landed with, have there been any interactions or conversations that have stuck out to you? And, when I think about, comments or DMs, I imagine there have been some conversations that have been started or that have struck you from those.
Yeah, I get a lot of people just reaching out saying either that, for example, I wasn't thinking about pursuing computer science, but now I want to, or
Mm,
or I'm currently on the path to studying computer science, and your stuff has really helped me. Honestly, some of the more impactful ones that I've received, which is not direct eyewitness accounts, but are parents who have reached out to me
mm,
and said,
interesting.
I have a kid I have a daughter, a son who's about to go to college, and I send them all of your videos because they might not listen to me, but they'll listen to you. And I'm like, that makes me feel really good and also bad at the same time. But I'm like, I think that being able to be a proxy for
Yeah.
parents is a really interesting dynamic, and I think there's some responsibility there. But those have been some of my favorite ones to sort of interact with, is people basically saying that they send me to their kids.
And that's incredible. The fact that a parent sends your content to their kids when parents are the biggest filter when it comes to, what they want to expose their children to, I think says a lot about your content, which is really cool. It also really just solidifies this fact of what we were talking about earlier of, how impressionable young kids are that are on social media right now, And it's like, wow, if these are the messages I'm getting and I believe I'm creating wholesome and authentic content, then like how is the impact of like the content that perhaps doesn't sit well with us doing and impressing onto kids? So a little bit scary to think about, to be honest.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I think that's where all the criticisms of these social medias, when it comes from the government or other things, I think could be handled better. But I think that the underlying concerns are there, and they're very real. The ability, the power that these apps have on the youth cannot be ignored. And the more good stuff that we can put out, the better. But at the same time, it would be foolish to ignore the fact that there are people out there who are probably either not doing it intentionally or maliciously, but they definitely are having a negative impact.
Completely agree. And so on that topic of, content having an impact. So who are some content creators in like, the self-development or, the masculinity or gym space that have had a really positive influence on you?
Interesting. So I think that I started working out in 2015, which was
Okay.
there were not really that many fitness influencers at the time.
Yeah.
I think that even all some of the fitness OGs today, as in the people who would be considered veterans in the space, refer to the same video which I watched, which motivated me, which is like the David Lade transformation
Mm,
video, which was like his like 14 to 18-year-old, whatever. I mean, it
yeah.
went mega viral on YouTube, but that was sort of like my catalyst for getting into the gym. And then I did watch a lot of David Lade within the gym space, stuff like people like Jeff Nippard, I think is also really good because he takes a very, very scientific approach, which is again something I like. Within sort of the self-improvement space, I would say that Let me think. Recently, I've been watching a lot of Scott Galloway. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's an older gentleman who started a company who's super successful. But I think that he sort of preaches a lot of the same messages that I do when it comes to masculinity and topics like that. So I'm a fan of him. Alex Hormozy, I think, is great for just sort of no BS business advice, no BS sort of improve your life from its current material conditions advice. Yeah, to be honest, there's a lot of, I also just consume a lot of content that's not necessarily beneficial to me, but just
Of
entertainment
course.
when it comes to like video game content, stuff like that. And so I'm not always just trying to do something that I think will immediately affect my life for the better.
100%, and I'm just as much on the entertaining side of YouTube as I am as like the educational side. And you mentioned David Lade and his journey at Gymshark. Scott Galloway, am familiar. I think I don't know if he still teaches at NYU, but a professor at business school at NYU. And Alex Hormozy, such a big fan. I think Alex is such a good example of what it means to provide value in the content creation space, because that's literally his like one core philosophy of like all the content that he makes. And it's so interesting because the strategy that he's developed for himself is to give so much, and that then acts as lead generation for businesses to want to work with acquisition.com, which is where the 100x returns will come for him, which is crazy. I'm like, man, that is so smart.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Scott and Alex, I've consumed a lot of their content as well. Are there any specific stories or takeaways that you remember that you've taken from their content that have stuck out to you?
I think with Alex Hormozy, so Alex Hormozy was I was the president of my fraternity and he was the president of his fraternity, and there's a lot of stories that come from that I actually also, whether I admit are from that experience, that
Mm-hmm.
he would bring up that I really liked. My favorite one from Alex Hormozy, I actually like to write down quotes from people
Mm,
that I really like, and one of them was from Alex Hormozy was, "This is what hard feels like." And it was essentially the concept that so many people these days, I think they don't like when there's any friction and they assume that automatically that's bad. But if you
mm,
ask somebody, you want to become super successful, give me the path to get there. Okay, is that going to be easy? And they'll say no. And they'll be like, okay, are you ready to do it? They'll be like, yeah, I'm ready. And then when it gets time and it's actually difficult, they are like something's wrong or they back out or just for comfort reasons. And so Hormozy basically says, okay, no, this is what hard feels like. And it gives yourself permission. He uses, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on here, but he
you can.
says, okay, he says, it gives you permission to feel shitty. It's like, this sucks, but this is what hard feels like. And it's like, okay, that's
Mm.
a really good sort of message I like, of like, okay, it's going to be difficult, but there you go. So that's one from Hormozy that I really like. And by the way, when I mentioned the president thing, he would tell that to his pledges, who when
Mm.
pledgeships started getting difficult, they would revolt and they would set up a meeting and be like, we didn't agree to this. And he's like, okay, did you think it was going to be easy? This is what hard feels like.
Yeah, and I specifically remember that pledge story as well. And I think what he kind of touches on is expectation, and expectation being so powerful. And if we can have the expectation before we start something that, hey, this is going to suck, but if we can get ready for that suck, then we will be in so much better place to handle it when it comes than expecting it to feel like daisies and fairies.
Yep.
So I'm still kind of new to the content creation game, not even a year. And I started last year in August of 2022 and posted, like 100 videos, 100 interviews, and didn't grow at all. But it's like this idea of doing something to do it because you get fulfillment from it and not expecting the short-term results right away. And that's something that Alex talks about all the time, is like he says the biggest thing he sees when he talks to people in their 20s is like they'll be working on a company for 6 months and they'll be like, how am I not a millionaire yet? And Alex is like, dude, like I was working, like sleeping in the back of the gym for years, you know what I mean, to get to the point where he is now. And I think it always reminds me to think in terms of decades, which is another quote that I like from him, instead of, months and years. So, Baxate, as we're wrapping up on time, we like to end off on this question, which is, what is something that you wish people knew about you or know about you? And the reason we like that question is because, being in the content creation space, sometimes our audience can put a distance between themselves and us, because of, what image that we've created for ourselves on social media, or them not feeling like, we're quote unquote human. And so this is an attempt to try to close that distance. And so would love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I guess I would say that no matter what I say or how I act, I'm no better than anyone, and I don't think I'm better than anyone. And all the advice I give is meant to, again, be something that hopefully can resonate with someone and be
Mm,
beneficial to someone. I know that sometimes when I speak, depending on how you're listening, it can maybe come off as braggadocious, and that's not the intent. The
mm,
intent is I have had success doing these things, and you might be able to replicate whatever is right for you. And but yeah, I don't think I'm better than anyone. I commonly refer to myself as like an average Joe or an average guy, regardless of what sort of metrics you're measuring against. I don't think that I'm special, and I want people to know that I am just a guy, and I am human, and I like to do a lot of the same things that other people like to do. And I play video games. I have my cheat meals that I really like and stuff like that. I'm not a machine, and nor am I someone who thinks that I'm above anyone else. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Baxate. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks, Timothy. Thank you for having me on, man.